Me and my friends were 12 years old the first time we got into a life-threatening situation. We were at my friend Sebastian's birthday party, and he invited 5 other people, and I knew all of them well. Their names were Cooper, Jackson, Adam, Aiden, and Brady. He lived really close to a school that we all went to, and it was getting dark. We decided that it would be cool to play manhunt in the dark, and we grabbed some flashlights and headed towards the school. For those of you who don't know, manhunt is a game where one person is it and tries to tag the other players. The other players have to hide. It's kind of a mixture between hide and seek and tag. The school courtyard was huge, and so there was plenty of hiding spots. All I could smell was cigarette smoke, and this was odd knowing that it never smelled like this in the morning when we went to school. Maybe some teenagers decided to smoke on school here because it was a nicer area with trees all around the courtyard. Anyway, I was first. I had to count for 2 minutes. I thought that it was annoying that I had to count for 2 minutes, which was forever as a kid, but I did it anyway. Right after I had counted, I had heard rocks being kicked from the left of me near the kids' playground. Automatically assuming it was one of my friends, I turned around and ran towards where I thought I heard the rocks being kicked, and checked all around the area, but saw nobody. I found it weird, but I quickly forgot about it after 20 or so minutes of looking, finding nobody. And that's when I saw all of them, except for Cooper hiding outside the agreed boundaries that we had made. I was annoyed and sprinted as fast as I could at them and tagged them. They were all laughing their heads off while I complained about how long it took to find them and how stupid I felt. They wanted to start another round after this, but I told them that Cooper still wasn't found, and they all looked at me confused because they said they saw him get tagged at the beginning of the game, near the playground and brought into the trees. At first I thought they were joking because my friends often did stuff like this all the time. After making them promise that it wasn't a joke, we rushed over to the trees where they said they saw him at the start of the game. We were legitimately terrified for Cooper's safety, and we quickly ran, and Sebastian yelled Cooper's name repeatedly. After no response, we ran even faster than before. Then, Cooper did respond, but it was with the most blood-curdling scream that I have ever heard. He was running full speed out of the trees, screaming. We all ran back to the house, closed and locked the doors in less than a minute. "What happened back there?" I had quickly asked. He waited a few seconds, clearly out of breath. What he said gives me the chills to just think about. This next part is told from his point of view. "I was hiding underneath the kids' playground, waiting for you to finish counting, and that's when someone covered my mouth and told me to be quiet. I saw the guy had a knife, so I did as he asked. I tried to make some noise by kicking some rocks wildly, trying to get your attention. It worked, and the man pulled me to my feet and threw me forward. I realized that he was no longer holding on to me and started sprinting to the woods. After that, I just ran as fast as I could until I got into someone's backyard and hopped the fence. I knew that I was breaking the law by being here. So, he peeked over the fence and saw him run past me. I waited about 10 minutes, hopped the fence, and ran back to the school. I looked around and saw that the person who had chased me out of the schoolyard was crouched beside the fence I had hopped. I started screaming as loud as I could, trying to get your attention, and that's when I saw you guys. The reason I tell you this story now instead of 2 years ago when this happened is because last night on the news they caught a man who, according to Cooper, looks exactly the same as that night 2 years ago. The thing that scares me the most about this is the reason he was arrested. He kidnapped 2 children and were found in his basement, a month after their abduction, dead. It gives me chills just thinking about me and my friend, seconds away from possibly being kidnapped, or worse. I was DMing for a small group of people. For those who don't know what DMing is, it's dungeon mastering for D&D, which is Dungeons and Dragons. There was this weird guy who played in the group. He was quiet and nervous all the time, and I never really paid it much mind due to the fact that we're a bunch of nerds sitting around a table rolling dice. But I wish I paid a bit more attention than I did, and maybe it would have stopped the year-long nightmare that I suffered. The game went normal as usual, and everyone packed up to leave at 7:30. We normally played at my house in the basement, so not to bother my roommates. We all said our goodbye, and I showed all 4 people out. My boyfriend comes over to my house around 8 p.m. every night, and the next day, leaving my flat for work, I noticed scratches on my door to the basement. I disregarded it. The next D&D game, the creep was the last to leave, and we talked about the game and ideas for it, and he left right as my boyfriend came home. He told me that he doesn't like him and for me to stay at his flat for the night. On the way to his flat, he told me that he saw, when he passed the guy in the driveway, that he saw the knife in his hand. A little apprehensive, I decided to stay with my boyfriend for a few days. When I finally did come home after 2 days, I was sitting on my couch and was a broken doorknob and a bottled boom. I called the cops and there was an investigation. The guy who was in my small D&D group has been taking pictures of me and was cutting them apart. They said that they were taking him to a hospital to properly treat him for whatever he has. A few months later, my boyfriend got a Facebook message from the guy, and it turns out he was released and was coming for us. My boyfriend quit work early and picked me up for my job, and we went to the police again. They asked me if had contacted me in any way, and I gave them my phone. He called me 15 times and Facebook messaged me over 23 messages telling me how he's going to cut me up and fuck the holes. My boyfriend and I went out, got me a new phone, and bought a new house. Only family and close friends are allowed to know where. The last I heard, he was released a few days ago from the funny farm. It is now December 4th, 2018. Although I've heard many stories from my uncle about his time as an EMT, this story that will stick with me until I die. About 6 years ago, my Uncle Vinny's paramedic crew responded to a call from a hotel in Philly, and it was one of the more horrific experiences he's ever had. The initial report stated that a maintenance man named Mike went to check on room 417 since water had been reported flooding into the hallway, and it was he who found the body. Mike informed 911 that there was a man in the in-suit hot tub who appeared to be deceased, and he was all but hyperventilating as he tried to make his report. Mike relayed that he saw the man and immediately backed out of the room, being careful not to drop his phone into several inches of water on the floor. My uncle's 2-man paramedic team entered the room about 12 minutes later, and they almost gagged at the smell of feces and burning flesh. Vinny, who has a stomach of steel, had to press his hand to his mouth to keep from vomiting. The room was filled with steam, and the humidity was instantly making the men sweat profusely. Their grip on their equipment was slipping, and they knew they needed to extract the victim quickly. The naked man was floating in the hot tub, a maniacal grin plastered across his face. From the looks of it, the man had been in the water for a while, since his bruised skin was starting to peel off his body in long, squishy strips. Vinny held his breath and checked for vitals, while one of the other EMTs went to get a bag for the body. Even though my uncle saw corpses regularly, this method of death was a disturbing first for him, and something about the whole situation was unnerving. As Vinny placed his fingers on the man's wrist, expecting to feel nothing, he had to choke back a startled scream when the victim's hand shot out and grasped his arm. It wasn't a corpse. The John Doe didn't show any other signs of being responsive, but when the other EMT went to check the man's eyes for dilation reaction, his pupils looked slitted, almost like those of a reptile. Vinny was weirded out, but dismissed it as a side effect of getting boiled alive like a hard-boiled egg. As the men removed the victim from the hot tub, the man began to thrash. Strips of flesh splattered on the EMTs. They tried to pin the man down to keep him from hurting himself, but he was shockingly strong. As the last bits of flesh dropped to the floor, Vinny saw that it wasn't more skin underneath, it was scales. His partner must have noticed too, because both men began screaming almost in unison. The thing began to growl, and my uncle's normal desire to figure out problems turned into sheer flight or fight response, with flight happening to win. He ran from the hotel room, his teammate on his heels. They slammed the door behind them, and a moment later, they heard one of the windows shatter. The men had no idea how to explain to their boss what happened. But after some phone calls and a few men in black suits appearing, they were given a specific story to follow. They were told to say that a John Doe tried to drown himself and that the mentally unhinged man climbed down the fire escape when his attempt had failed. Vinny, who was paid extra well to keep his mouth shut, never did tell anyone about this story until he shared it with me the other day. I could tell he didn't want to, but I was the only one in the family that he thought would believe him. The only reason he even shared his ridiculous story is because he thinks something has been stalking him the last few weeks, and he's worried that the creature has returned. I thought he was crazy until I went to his house yesterday and saw a trail of bipedal, clawed footprints underneath his windowsill. And now, my uncle is missing, and I think I'm the only one that really knows what happened to him. My fiancée Alana and I have always been into the occult and paranormal. We're the kind of people who used to fantasize about getting to see a cryptid or exploring a famous haunted location just for the thrill. I have to be careful about being around too much of the dark energy that some haunted locations have, though, since I'm an empath. For anyone not familiar with the term, an empath is defined as a person with the paranormal ability to apprehend the mental or emotional state of another individual. Since childhood, I've learned to manifest my ability, and by now, I could absorb emotions from the physical and metaphysical realms. It's a blessing and a curse. Last Tuesday, Elena and I were in the car on our way home from work when our favorite DJ came on the radio. Good evening, this is Mitchell McCarthy on WSK 99.4, and we have a treat for the first person who can call and name this song from the following snippet. This is your last chance to win one of our road trip revelry packages. After a brief pause, the music started playing, and we listened intently. I see trees of green, red roses too. I see them bloom for me and you, and I think to myself, what a wonderful. As it stopped, the radio host came back on. Now, let's see which lucky caller will win this road trip-tastic reward. Elena's mom is a huge fan of older music, so we already knew who it was and what the song was. My fiancée immediately dialed the number, not expecting to be the right caller, but she was. I grinned as she correctly blurted out the right answer silently, high-fiving her. Louis Armstrong, What a Wonderful World. The radio host paused dramatically, and then he made a drum roll sound with his hands. Ladies and gents, we have a winner. You know what that means, miss. You and two friends have an all-inclusive road trip to a wonderful New Orleans, and you guys will be getting to Louisiana just in time to get some beads. My fiancé got off the phone, grinning from ear to ear. Let's go pick up the tickets, though I know neither of us is really interested in Mardi Gras. I nodded, thinking about who else we should have tag along with us. Oh, we should bring Co. He's right along the way, and who said we have to go to Mardi Gras? I'd rather go to the Manchac Swamp, the home of the Garoo. I think the locals call it the Cajun Werewolf. After getting the hotel tickets and the food and gas vouchers, we packed our bags. I made sure to bring a bunch of extra socks, since I've always hated having wet socks on. And then we called up the office and put in our time off. 2 weeks later, we set off on a road trip from northeast Pennsylvania to the bayou country of Louisiana, and I couldn't remember being more excited for a vacation. The whole ride south, Elena and I discussed our plans for the trip. Neither of us have ever been to Louisiana or thought we would have ever been so we had never looked up what things to do in the area. Upon searching Google rigorously, we finally made a plan for a week in Louisiana, and it couldn't have been more perfect unless we went in October rather than July. Maybe we would just relax in the hotel, but we weren't staying in just any hotel. The one the radio prize included was a stay at the Dauphine Orleans Hotel, which was located in the French Quarter. This hotel is rumored to be one of the most haunted hotels in Louisiana, and it complemented the theme of our trip perfectly. Tuesday, we would explore the French Quarter and see if we could spot the infamous vampire twins of Louisiana. On Wednesday, we would explore the outskirts of the city and try to find old houses that had been abandoned, as well as visiting some of the famous voodoo shops. Thursday, we would explore the supposedly haunted St. Vincent's Asylum, which was also located in the French Quarter. And then for the weekend, we would go to the Manchac Swamp and camp. We would search for the Rougarou and for the voodoo princess Julie White's cabin that was said to be hidden deep in the Manchac Swamp. As the hours passed, Elena and I switched off driving through each state, stopping for leg breaks. Finally, 14 hours into the trip, and we reached our pit stop for the night. We parked in my best friend Keandre, who we all call Co.'s driveway in Birmingham, Alabama, and it felt great to be out of the car. It was actually our first time meeting him in person, so it was an emotional moment for all of us. He was overjoyed to see his big bro and big sis, and since he was a fairly large man, he squeezed us into his pillow-like frame with gusto. After telling me about our plan for the week, he was eager to pack some camping gear and to read up about local lore. His tone was zealous, and he quickly gathered what he needed. "I want to see the giant wolfman of Manchac Swamp." That was the last thing he said before we all went to sleep. And after 14 hours of straight driving, my fiance and I were so exhausted that even the hardwood floor of Co's bedroom felt like a memory foam mattress. The next morning, we got up around 8:30 and set off on the last 4 hours of the drive. We were so excited to finally be in the voodoo capital of the US, and right around mid-afternoon, we reached New Orleans. The minute I stepped into the hotel, the energy hit me like a freight train. It made me physically sick for about an hour, and after checking into room 113, we decided to relax and take a nap. We wanted to spend the night with our EVP and heat cameras trying to find any spirits that were here, and to see if they were as bad as they had seemed. None of us could sleep well though, and I'm not sure if it was because of our excitement or if something more sinister and paranormal was keeping us awake. We ate dinner out and checked out some local attractions, and when the clock hit midnight and we got our equipment unpacked, the EVP meter immediately started going off, worse than at any other place I had been to. Elena and Co. nearly shit their pants at the sight of how much energy was in our room alone, and it definitely explained the feeling I had when I first walked into the building. After 20 minutes of setting up cameras and unpacking equipment, we were ready to explore. As we walked through the empty halls of the hotel, we whispered about how odd it was that such a packed hotel would be so silent in the dead of night. Nearly 45 minutes had passed and nothing at all was caught on our heat camera, and the EVP device wasn't going off as much as it was initially. So we decided to call it a night since we would have more time to explore in the upcoming days. The next few days had passed, and we were all growing restless over the fact that we hadn't seen anything even remotely paranormal yet. The places we picked should have had at least some kind of interesting vibes, but there wasn't anything. Over dinner on Wednesday night, Elena made a proposal that Co and I readily agreed to. "Babe, can we just cancel the St. Vincent's tour and go to the swamp tomorrow? It seems like all of the drunk living partiers scared anything paranormal off." After she was done talking, I nodded enthusiastically, and Co breathed a sign of relief. Thank God someone else had the same thought. We set off back to the hotel to check out and gather our stuff. After about an hour of packing, we fit everything back into our car, heading straight to a trailhead near the swamp. Based off all of the legends, this was the part of the swamp that we would be most likely to see the Rougarou in, or find the legend still standing witch's cabin. Since I was the only one who was an avid hunter, I was the only one with a gun, and I made sure to pack my .45 caliber pistol with 2 full clips of ammo, in case of any emergency I may run into. It's common knowledge that large snakes and alligators live in the swamps in Louisiana, so we had figured out that we would rather have some means of defense than nothing at all, and after walking what seemed like hours, we finally decided to take a rest. We had just trekked through one of the roughest parts of the swamp trail, so I immediately changed my socks. I figured that we could use the grime-covered ones as fire fuel later in the night if we couldn't find tinder, and I had plenty with me, so I wasn't worried. Thankfully, it was a warm night in the swamp though, so we didn't need to start a fire at all. The fireflies surrounded us that night, and it was as if they were a million stars. It was literally the most beautiful thing any of us had ever seen, and it was so relaxing that we were all dozing off on our own camping chairs. that is, until we heard an eardrum bursting howl that sounded like it was right behind us. I took out my pistol and fired a warning shot, and a moment later the grass behind us parted to reveal a scraggly-looking man with long, dark hair. "Please, don't shoot me. I wandered in here on accident and I don't even know where he is. I heard you guys talking and thought you might know the way out." My fiancée, being the caring person she is, paid no mind to the fact that his clothing was torn up and he looked a little unhinged. She invited him to sit with us and even got him a granola bar. After about 10 uncomfortable minutes, I finally spoke up. "So, why are your clothes torn up?" He gave a vague response about how the swampy can beat you up, but he didn't go into detail. I once again tried to get some information out of our strange visitor, though his heavy Cajun accent was a little hard to understand. "Did you see the thing that made that horrendous howl?" He shifted a little, and I could tell he wasn't feeling very comfortable with my questions. He finally replied, after thinking about his response carefully, "Boy, you can call me Jack. Now that we're all friends here, there's no need to worry. I can assure you I'm not one of those beasts. In fact, that howl is what scared me into coming here. I don't know how I got here, though. I'm assuming I was drunk after the last week of Mardi Gras." I looked at Ko, as if to give him a "I don't trust him completely" look. Ko immediately returned the look, but we continued to chat amicably. We gave Jack an extra sleeping bag and told him that if he was welcome to sleep in one of the chairs. We said we would show him the way out in the morning, since it was too dangerous to travel in the swamp at night, which he readily agreed to. The next morning, we all arose to find Jack was missing. I looked at Elena and shook my head. "Still trust him?" "You and I both know he had very odd energy." She sighed and just looked down, knowing I was right. We packed our gear up, hiking further into the swamp. The next few hours went fast and the heat was blistering. We all just wanted to relax in the water, but even we knew it wasn't wise to swim in bayou water. A few hours later, we finally saw a broken down shack in the middle of the swamp, and we got excited. What if this was the cabin of the voodoo princess? The shack had been left untouched for a long time, since there was moss growing on everything. We made our way inside the building and were immediately weirded out. Laying on the floor was a little hand-sewn doll, and it looked exactly like Jack. We decided to set up camp for the night, but made sure we got well away from the shack. That night was a bit chillier, so we made a fire. We were telling scary stories around it when we again heard a low howl. No sooner had I put my gun in my hands when Jack came walking out of the swamp. "Friends, we meet again. I'm sorry I left so unexpectedly this morning. A big ol' snake chased me off, and then I got lost until I saw the fire. Mind if I stay with you again tonight?" We hesitated, but we didn't want him to get hurt out there, so we agreed. He smiled and thanked us again, and the hours passed quickly as we ate and chatted until we got sleepy. The next morning, the same thing had happened. Jack had vanished again, leaving us all extremely concerned. I had decided that if we saw him again tonight, I would stay awake until morning to see where he kept going. We hiked back out of the swamp, double timing it to cover more ground than our previous unhurried place. We had not seen anything out of the normal, other than that doll and Jack, but we had still had fun. We got back to the first campsite relatively fast, though we were all exhausted by then. After setting up camp, I told Ko and Elena my plan for the night in case Jack did come back, and Ko decided he would be staying up with me because he didn't want to risk me getting harmed. Once again, we heard the howl after sunset, and as expected, Jack came walking out of the swamp behind us right after. We all exchanged a look and welcomed him back as though nothing had happened. A few hours later, Elena fell asleep, and so did Ko, despite him saying he would stay up. He finally passed out, and I pretended to while I was still sleeping, but keeping an eye on Jack. I must have dozed off at some point because when I opened my eyes, the fire was out and Jack was heading into a nearby clump of bushes. I got up and followed him, trying to see where he went into the dim moonlight. "Jack, where are you going?" His response was not what I expected. Instead of hearing him shout back, I heard the howl again, but this time it was behind me. and as I turned around slowly, I saw it. The Garoo. It was large, almost humanoid white wolf with the most blood-red eyes I had ever seen. I'm ashamed to admit it, but I was terrified and I blacked out. Upon waking, I jumped up and looked around, terrified because I was still somewhere in the swamp with that thing. Dawn was just showing and I stumbled back to camp. I could hear Elena and Co shouting to me from the distance and I hurried back to them. They looked worried sick and we were relieved to be back together. We figured I must have had a night terror, which I was known for, and I must have sleepwalked out of camp. We made our way back out of the swamp and back to our car, and after packing up quickly, we headed out of Louisiana and on our way back towards Co's house. On our way back home, however, I felt different. I was more hungry than normal, and as I looked into the mirror, my normal hazel eyes did something I had never seen before. They flashed blood red, just like the monster I had seen the night before. I had a really weird encounter around 3 years ago when I was 13 that scared the shit out of me and has had me on edge for a while. Well, anyway, I was walking home from my friend's house at around 8 p.m. one night during October, so it was obviously getting dark. I started getting a bad feeling when I got to the downtown area and realized someone in a black hoodie and a large black dog was behind me, and I started feeling like I was being followed. So I wandered down some alleyways and made a number of random turns and, well, got lost, and that person in that black hoodie with that black dog was following me, and I started to get frustrated and slightly scared, so I started to run, and that was a big mistake. As soon as I started running, I heard loud breaking and a creepy crackling. I looked back and saw the dog running towards me, so I started sprinting towards a wooded area on the edge of town and jumped a few fences on the way. And then I was in the woods and decided to climb up a tree. And from the view up the tree, I saw that damn creep and his dog jumping fences the same way I went, and he started yelling, "Come out, kid, I'm not gonna hurt you, I just want to take you to my house." When I heard this, I felt a rush of fear and just stayed in the tree for what felt like an eternity until he finally left. And then I made my way home, and I never saw that creep and his dog again. I hope I never see him or his dog again, and I hope no one else does either. Who knows what plans he had for me that night.